for Teacher Task Force and teachers or ICBA. We are co-organizing this meeting. And my name is Yumiko Yokozaki. I'm taking you through to this important meeting. So following from the regional meeting we had in May and June in 2020 on distance teaching and the return to school, the Teacher Task Force and the ICBA organized new series of discussion to coincide with the World Teachers' Day celebration. So welcome to this meeting. We have a few housekeeping issues. Please put your audio and video disabled. Only the people who are talking will have a video on. In fact, we have a very limited connectivity. So I'm going to put my video off because I don't want to be cut off. So sorry, you'll be just hearing my voice. Now, if you have a questions using the chat box, the I think Q&A function, there is a chat box. So please put your question and answer questions, and you may answer to other people's questions. And this session is being recorded. I hope you don't mind. And the recording of the presentation will be available in both Teacher Task Force and the ICBA website. Now, just a little bit about ourselves. ICBA is UNESCO's Category 1 institute in Africa, and we are 20 years old. And our work includes capacity development, mainly on teacher development, and partnership advocacy, and research and development. And the teacher task force, which Peter is going to talk more in details later, was created in 2008, and it's a global independent alliance working solely on teachers and teachers' issues. And it is, excuse me, it is dedicated to advocate for the teaching profession, expand knowledge, and support countries on the question and themes raised in Target 4 of SDG 4. Now, organized by Teacher Task Force in collaboration with ICBA, this meeting is part of a series of regional virtual meetings to commemorate World Teachers' Day, Teachers Leading in Crisis, Reimagining the Future, with national and regional stakeholders on education to engage in a dialogue on issues related to teachers and teaching as countries develop responses to COVID-19 induced school closure and plans for school reopening. We are hoping that this meeting to take forward the discussion on the theme of teacher leadership, how it has emerged organically, how it was planned, and how it needs to be better leveraged to ensure the provision of quality teaching and learning continues in building back better in achieving SDG 4C. The meeting will begin with a keynote from a teacher from South Africa, and then this will be followed by presentation by partner organizations, namely ADEA, Education International, and MasterCard Foundation. And then the meeting will continue with the three stakeholders' perspectives from member countries, Botswana, the Gambia, and the Rwanda. And this will be followed by a short intervention from Teacher Task Force, and then questions and answers. Now, can you put the program, Henok, please? And the first presenter is Miss Landy Diamond, head of Westlake Primary School in South Africa. And she was awarded the hello. She was awarded the excellence in leadership in South Africa. So I would like to congratulate you, Miss Landy Diamond. You have a 5 minute. Are you ready? You have a 5 minutes to share your ideas. Thank you very much. Over to you. And other people, please mute your microphone. It will help. So Ms. Landy Diamond, over to you.
Thank you so much. Can Peter please hear my presentation so that I can start? Basically, the title of my presentation is looking at the solutions-driven approach in managing COVID-19 at school. As we know that we're all encountered by this global pandemic, we decided that as a school, we're going to have an approach that is solutions-driven and that needed a strategic form of leadership in seeking to find these solutions. And I'm going to basically share some practical challenges that we had and how we went about navigating as a school in terms of coping with this pandemic. The first thing that we had to do is to embrace change and not swim against the current. This meant that we had to look into policy amendments as a school, the SGB, which is the governing body of the school, and the senior management team. As you can see on the picture there, that we had to do some policy debates, amending our policies, looking at the national SOPs, standard operating procedures, and our provincial guidelines in terms of embedding COVID-19 into our existing strategies and policies. And this meant, of course, an unpredictable and uncontrollable planning because we had to monitor the country situation. The other picture, I had to look at the front line, which is the non-teaching staff, in terms of preparing infrastructure and making sure that the school is ready to receive educators and learners. The picture of the desk that you see over there, we had to do a physical distancing, 1.5 meters, and also trace each learner so that in the case of a COVID outbreak at the school, we would be able to know if the outbreak is because of the school infections or not. And we have successfully managed this process as a school. We only had 3 COVID cases, and those cases were all not related. They're coming from home, and those learners and those teachers did not affect the other educators. Next slide. While we are doing all this, we had to navigate through with the school's vision in mind, because we had to keep into cognizance the reason for the school's existence. The one picture is the Minister of Education that was visiting schools in South Africa to check if schools are ready for the children post the lockdown process. And that picture of the children is the first day of school. I've got a group of anxious learners full of anxiety, not knowing what to expect at school. Obviously, what we had to do, look into psychosocial support. We dealt with anxiety and wellness. We had to work with children and do activities like free writing, allowing them to check in and make sure that their anxiousness is at ease before we could even look at curriculum. This process was the same with the staff. We did orientation. We treated each child, each person as if they have COVID, and as if they don't know anything about COVID-19. The other picture there, it's a screening process that had to take place every morning before the children received the curriculum. And the curriculum delivery was a tricky process because our children were to operate at a 50% capacity of the school. Whereas we used to teach everything on site, now we had to teach some of the content at school, and the other consolidating activities had to happen off-site. This had a lot of implications. The complexity and this redefined our roles. My role as a principal, the school management team's role was redefined as they needed an adaptive form of leadership. Most importantly, the parents' role was redefined. We had to team up with our parents. Next slide. And we are a challenged community in terms of access. Next slide, Peter, please. We are a challenged community, and not all our children have access to the internet. Can we please show the next slide? We have an internet issue, which means that we had to consolidate and give our children hard copies. That is a picture of one of my parents issuing hard copies to children. We also had to give nutrition to these learners during lockdown and post-lockdown, because some of these children only get food when they come to the school's feeding process. So those are the children that had to come to school to receive a meal, and we also had to give them some work. We also had a situation where parents had to collect pieces of work for their children who were not able to come to school when we were in level 4 and in level 5. Some of the challenges that we had as a school, we had to make sure that the screening stations are clearly defined. We color-coded our learners. We had a red group, the green group, so that we don't have overcrowding in these different screening stations. The children are not confused. They know exactly which station to go to. We use these colors as far as managing during interval, because you know, if I'm in the red group, I have to be in a certain designated area at school. This minimized chaos, and the children were kind of assured as to where they need to go. We also closed entry to the school entirely, limited to staff and learners and the delivery vans. And all our meetings with parents had to now change and be online, and this was a bit of a challenge because not all the parents are able to do online activities. Because some of the teachers had to quarantine, we had some high absenteeism. However, as a school, we were not greatly affected by this because of our traces and protocols that were highly effective that we have put in place. Then the next thing that I would like, because of time, I'm just rushing through this idea. Some take home, right? As schools, we are challenged, but we need to keep into cognizance the purpose for the school's existence. In the next slide, we need to keep the vision of the school. However, we need to adjust because we have this purpose, but we have to work and monitor each country's situation. Structure and monitoring protocols, it must be in place to minimize the virus. And at this stage where we are now, where we've quieted down, also to avoid a possible second wave in terms of prevention. Have a plan, but be flexible to adjust as the situation demands, and most specifically, striking a balance between on-site and home curriculum, taking into account the non-digital context and learners who have no access to the internet, and what parental programs you can put in place to support parents that have to now have this role of supporting the learners at home, and also to support children who are not used to having this huge responsibility of doing 50% of the curriculum from home. Anxiety is always going to be there because all these processes are a new normal for teachers and children alike. And some parents are also affected by anxiety. Some psychosocial support. We have to constantly engage and see what is it that we can do to support the school community. Moving forward, and in closing, the challenges are going to be there because at the moment in South Africa, we have a three curriculum. We will be going back into the normal curriculum post-COVID, and that is going to definitely be a challenge because of the amount of work that the children have now is going to go back to normal. We need to be strategic in doing that, and also bridging the gap between the distant home learning and school learning, and looking what are the things that we're going to do to maximize access. Blended learning is a challenge. We can only teach most areas using remote learning and not necessarily online. And looking at the fourth industrial revolution demands, we need to find a way of supporting these communities and these children and making sure that we are moving towards blended learning because the current situation demands that. And in my last slide, some of the things that I have done as a school are on my website and on my YouTube page. You can go onto that YouTube page. There will be some of the videos of the things we've done during lockdown, and you can follow that or post some questions that we could not answer at this platform because we don't have much time. But otherwise, I'm going to come to a conclusion, and there's a closing thought in my last slide. A mind that has been stretched to a new idea never goes back to this original dimension. We need to navigate through and embrace this change because the COVID virus is here and it has damaged the manner in which we are operating. However, we need to stay positive and motivated and see how do we keep our chins above the waters and make sure that our institutions are flourishing regardless. I thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lundy Diamond, the winner of the National Teaching Award for Excellence in School Leadership in South Africa. Your presentation brought us to the reality, what can be done in schools and the country. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I am going to invite our regional partners. First, ADEA, Senior Program Officer, Mr. Shem Bodo. Shem, are you ready? Thank you.
Yes.
And then just before, please, participants, we shall be sharing all these slides through our website. So please don't worry. You can get them later. So Shem, please, you have 7 minutes to go, and you have a slide.
Yumiko.
Okay.
Yes. Could we have the slide on, please? So I'm going to talk about focusing on teachers, but looking at the area of empowerment, sharing some, thought-provoking insights, and then looking at really what ADEA is doing towards supporting this important element of empowering teachers. So if we go to the next slide, we start at the continental level, and we see that the teacher is at the center, really, of the vision of Africa. If you look at the African Union Agenda 2063, and you come to CESA 16 to 25, where you have the very first objective about revitalizing the teaching profession, so that we can talk about quality and relevance at the different levels of education. And then you see that teaching really is at the core of achieving that inclusive, quality, and relevant education, and where the teacher really plays the important part of being the influencer, the facilitator, and the nurturer of learners. And we see that the African Union has gone ahead and actually have a specific cluster related to teacher development. And of course, us as ADEA, we do have an inter-country quality node that is dedicated to teaching and learning. So this shows you the importance of the teacher really at the continental vision. Next slide. So having said that, we have that key challenge, which was highlighted in the first slide. How do we really bring back the value and the status of the teaching profession? How do we revalorize this teaching profession? So this is what the next slide, this slide we are in, tries to answer. And I would like to pose that we have both motivation, external motivation, but also internal motivation or intrinsic motivation. And I would like to say that self-empowerment is a key to this journey. We need to work on our inner reflection as teachers, raise the intrinsic aspects of motivation towards having the empowerment or achieving empowerment. Because we need to recognize that teachers should also recognize themselves as really having that supreme value as an influencer, as a facilitator, as a protector, and as a nurturer. And the teachers need to really feel this and show this kind of empowerment status in the classroom. The way they conduct themselves, the way they engage with the learners. And on the other side, learners should also be able to discern this. They should be able to see the teacher as really that pedestal of empowerment. And now the question then is, to what extent are our teachers teaching with value-driven and value-laden aspects in their teaching? Do our teaching go beyond just mere words? And I've given there an example of teaching love. So also drawing on our inner ability to be self-empowered. Next slide. So I would like to say that for us, as part of our contribution, we are doing several studies to support this process, courtesy of the MasterCard Foundation. One of those is a comparative study on the status of school teachers in terms of preparation and in terms of their career path in both pre-primary, primary, and secondary education. And we are specifically looking at the cases of Rwanda, Kenya, and Botswana. A second study is focusing really on STEM education, but with a strong focus on teachers. We want to undertake a situational analysis in African countries so that we can determine ongoing and promising initiatives in this particular domain towards improving policy development. The third one is developing a monitoring and evaluation framework for teachers on STEM education, as well as education officials. And as we know, we cannot achieve all this if we don't have a peaceful environment. So we want to look at how to assess the integration of peace education in teaching and learning in 10 African countries. To what extent have those efforts that have been put in place bearing fruit? So going further, and which will be my last slide, we also do have certain initiatives at the regional and as well as the national levels. We did undertake engagement with countries in 2 phases. And among the challenges that we found was the inadequacy in the teacher preparation to really cope with the COVID-19 challenge. And support, especially in many of the countries, has not been on par. We know there are cases where teachers are getting depressed. We know there are cases where, especially if you look at the private schools, there are many teachers who have lost jobs because some of those schools will not even open or reopen compared to others in the public sector. So these are issues. And then when you look at the fact that we are going to have major areas around supporting learners in terms of caring for them beyond just teaching, then we can see that the teacher is going to be having a lot of extra pressure to play that role of the leader beyond just teaching in the classroom. So those are some of the challenges that we noted in the studies and the engagements that we had with countries. Now, at the regional level, we have this KICS observatory. We are developing a KICS observatory on COVID-19 impact on education. This is courtesy of a grant by GPE and being administered by IDRC. So here, the observatory is going to examine country-level education policies and practices in terms of supporting teacher training and support. And this includes looking at areas of motivation, looking at areas of health, and looking at areas of the teacher well-being. And this is not the only area in the entire KICS Observatory project. There are other areas, learner well-being, for example, and we are going to cover the entire 40 countries in Africa that this is an ongoing project, it's an 18-month project, and we believe that this will really contribute to this particular subject. And then lastly, we are developing what we call a remote education benchmarking toolkit. So this toolkit will help to guide countries to be able to really see to what extent they can come to grips with the reopening of learning institutions, but also how to get the education sector to be resilient to the shocks such as those that have been produced by COVID-19 in future. And one of those norms, in fact, 2 of them are focusing on the teacher. One is looking at a strong teaching workforce capacity, and also what it takes to have appropriate teaching and learning curricula to be able to deploy remote education successfully. So this benchmarking tool has got criteria of a country being ready, a country being partially ready, and a country being not ready. And under each of the norms, we have several standards that act as a checklist that countries can then use to really see where they are and what they need to do. So these are some of the things that we are trying to do in order to really contribute to this empowerment of teachers. So thank you, Yumiko, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Shem, for sharing ADEA's contribution for teacher empowerment. That's very, very impressive. Now we are going to Dr. Denis Signolo, Education International. Yes, please have the slides ready. And Denis, you have 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yumiko, and thanks to IGBA and the Teacher Task Force for inviting Education International to join this important webinar. Yes, colleagues, as you will see the slide pop up in a moment, on Monday, Education International had the biggest online celebration of teachers. We started in Asia Pacific, moved to Africa, moved to the MENA region, and to the rest of the world, and ended in Latin America. It was a magnificent celebration. And thanks for joining us and for joining teachers around the world in valuing this important profession. So I'll basically talk about teachers taking the lead. And as you can see on this slide, that is a reflection of what happened on Monday. I would like to basically draw your attention to a study that we launched on Monday, which focuses on the impact of COVID-19 on education in Africa and how teachers and their unions are responding to it. Next slide, please. Now, this is a summary of the findings of that study. Of course, it's seriously condensed. It shows clearly that distance education programs have not been effective, mainly due to connectivity challenges. Yes, governments have tried radio, TV programs, take-home packages, but it is the rich, those who are from urban areas, who have actually benefited. The vast majority of children, rural areas, and marginalized girls and boys, children with disabilities, refugees and migrants, etc., have not benefited from learning during COVID-19. And teachers lack the skills we just heard from Adea and the previous keynote speaker. So teachers lack the necessary digital skills to deliver online learning. And then social dialogue has not been effective. It has not been genuine. It has not been consistent. We'll come back to that in a moment. And not enough measures have been taken to ensure the health and well-being of teachers, especially as schools reopen on the continent. And then it's also clear from the report that educators and their unions have taken concrete measures to respond to the crisis. I'll just share with you a few examples of slides that reflect what I've just said. Next slide, please. Now, this slide shows you the overall impact. As you can see on this slide, almost all schools were closed, and then only those examination classes that were to actually write exams or get ready for exams resumed in school learning in a number of countries. But otherwise, during the peak of the pandemic, all these schools were closed. I've already highlighted the challenges faced by teachers. It's important to also note that, in fact, teachers were also getting infected. We just heard about teachers in private schools who have been dismissed or have gone for months without pay. So that has been a real challenge. Next slide, please. Yes, this slide shows you how teacher unions or education unions have been responding to the pandemic. You can see that many of them have been raising awareness among their members. They've engaged in social and policy dialogue. They've developed tools for their members. Next slide. Now, this is an important slide because it shows you to what extent policy dialogue has been happening. Now, 51% of the unions that respond by unions in Africa from 33 countries, they said they were consulted, but their views were only sometimes taken. That's 51%, not always. Fully taken, it was only 9%. And not consulted at all, 28%. So that is concerning. There is no way as governments we can actually come up with an effective response to COVID-19 without engaging with teachers through their organizations. Next slide. Now, this shows you the kind of support the government provided to teachers during COVID-19. You can see, of course, there was some training, 28%, but what's concerning is the bar on your far right. No measures have been taken, 62%. So very little support has been given to teachers during COVID-19. Next slide.
Hi, Dennis. You have 1 minute.
Now, this is a summary of the recommendations emanating from the study. So basically, we are urging governments to involve teachers, to make schools healthy and safe for students, for teachers, for education support personnel. It's important to train teachers and empower them to be able to teach using blended learning. Of course, there is no replacement for in-school learning. There is no replacement for schools and teachers. So we should be able to consolidate in-school learning moving forward post-pandemic. So basically, it's also important for governments to engage in continuous dialogue with teacher unions that can help governments to come up with very strong education policies, involve unions right from the beginning throughout the policy development process, right up to the end. They're not just policy implementers, they are change agents. They can help us to come up with effective policies. Thank you very much. Back to you, Yumiko. Chair, back to you.
She might have a problem with the microphone. Peter, would you like to proceed?
I think we can proceed. We will call therefore upon James McIntyre from the MasterCard Foundation. Henrik, if you can load that presentation. And the floor is yours, James.
Great, thanks, Peter. Thanks very much for the opportunity to join the meeting and to speak a bit about the Foundation's education programming with school leaders. I think the theme of this year is World Teacher Day, Leading in Crisis, Reimagining the Future really resonates at the Foundation and its work with teachers and thinking about leadership for learning. If you can go back one slide. Actually, no, that's fine. Sorry, that's okay. You can go back to that slide. It's okay. I'll get through that. Yeah. So the MasterCard Foundation is a private independent foundation, one of the largest funders of education programming in Africa. As part of the Foundation's Young Africa Work strategy, education programming is a really critical component to ensuring that young people acquire the skills and knowledge that they need for success in work and life. And the Foundation sees school and teacher leadership as critical to achieving this as part of our education and skills programming. Next slide, please. So why school leadership? I mean, we know that improving school leadership is one of the key factors that's associated with improved quality in the education system, and research has shown that school leadership accounts for up to 25% of variation in students' learning achievement, second only to teacher quality. And limited instructional leadership by teacher and school leaders really reflects a legacy of kind of old perceptions about the roles of teachers and school leaders, which historically has been conceived more in terms of rote instruction, administration, and oversight rather than educational leadership. And one of the challenges that we've seen in many of the countries where we're working is that many times educators are promoted to school leadership positions, but there are gaps in terms of induction training or other qualifications to make sure that school leaders are set up to succeed and are equipped to effectively foster a strong learning environment. And so there's a lot of value that can be had in having mandatory certified training to prepare educators to make that next step to school leadership positions. Next slide, please. So in addition to our other education programming, through interventions like the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Program, and as Shem mentioned, our important partnership with IDEA, focusing on school leadership is one of the 4 key pillars of the Foundation's Leaders in Teaching initiative, along with teacher recruitment, teacher training, and teacher motivation. The school leadership pillar of the Leaders in Teaching initiative is a really key ingredient in the success of our work, improving the quality of teaching and learning. Leaders in Teaching is a multi-country initiative, and it takes a holistic approach to strengthening teacher quality. And it looks at how we can support school leaders to succeed, create positive instructional environments, and provide strong coaching and mentorship support to teachers in their schools. So our work with school leaders includes various levels, including district and sector education officials, as well as head teachers, deputy head teachers, school subject leaders, and classroom teachers. Next slide, please. So as part of Leaders in Teaching, we work with partners like VVOB and AIMS and others to implement a package of continuous professional development support to school leadership. It includes postgraduate certificate and diploma level training and mentorship and coaching. We've set up professional networks and communities of practice so that school leaders have opportunities to share experiences and coach one another. And then some in-school targeted training for school leaders to strengthen things like the integration of educational technologies and support to teachers in facilitating distance and ICT-enabled teaching and learning. So in Rwanda, where we've piloted a lot of the Leaders in Teaching approach, when schools closed down in response to the pandemic, we've made a number of adaptations in partnership with VVOB to make sure that all of the CPD programs are delivered online or in audio form. And we also kind of recognize the important role that school leaders play in preparing for future crises. And so the CPD training is also being adapted to integrate some emergency preparedness into the content. And we're exploring how we can move some additional planning and management at the school level online. We're also starting to adapt some of the Leaders in Teaching initiative model in Ghana and other foundation priority countries. And so this will include things like in-service and pre-service blended learning programs for school leaders, support for school improvement planning, and linking training to qualification frameworks and continuous professional development requirements. Next slide, please. So, we don't have a lot of time, but just, to run through some of the lessons that we've learned in implementing some of this leadership training. We know that effective, strong district level support plays a really important role in strengthening instructional leadership at the school level. We know that, teachers have a very important role to play as leaders themselves, but leadership development, should really try to avoid promoting experienced and effective teachers out of the classroom. One of the key recommendations from the Foundation's recent Secondary Education in Africa report is the need to develop stronger promotion and leadership pathways for high-performing teachers that allow them to provide instructional leadership and to mentor junior colleagues. We also want to make sure that all of our training and activities in school don't detract from the roles that teachers and school leaders play. Next slide, please. So, investments in good quality pre-service education for teachers, strong support for new teachers, effective school leadership, including coaching and mentoring, and effective in-service and development can really lead to a kind of virtuous cycle, which develops a motivated workforce with strong professional ethics, which will ultimately lead to improved learning outcomes, in turn leading to efficiencies as fewer students repeat grades, and a better educated cohort of new entrants join the teaching profession. So we believe that strong school leadership is a really key component in fostering the development of this kind of virtuous cycle. And high quality educational leadership is, remains a key ingredient of positive learning outcomes and continues to be a really key priority for investments by the Foundation. Thanks very much for that, for providing an opportunity to give you a bit of a brief overview of our work in leadership. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, James. Sorry, participants, I was frozen. My computer was frozen. But thank you very much for sharing your excellent work from our MasterCard Foundation. And also, Denise Asignolo, thank you so much. And congratulations on EI's excellent COVID-19 study, and also excellent 24-hour celebration for the Worldwide Education International. That was very impressive. Now, I know you have a lot of comments and questions, but please keep them in your head or put them on the chat box. And then we are going into the member countries to share their perspectives. We are going to ask first Botswana. Mr. Mosimanegape Ngasa, are you there? Mr. Mosimanegape? Peter, has he joined?
I think he's having, so I want to.
Okay, let's go to the Gambia. Mr. Lamin Fatojo, are you ready to make your presentation? You have 7 minutes to talk. Mr. Lamin, over to you.
Yes.
Do you have
I'm waiting for it.
The presentation? It takes a few seconds. You can start talking. Mr. Lamy, you are Director of Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. You're speaking from Banjul, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm speaking from Banjul.
Okay, please start, and the slides will come in a few minutes.
Okay, I'm going to speak on the country's perspective with regards to our responses and current trends that are happening and some of the developments to improve on leadership and empower schools and teachers to take lead in the new dimension that we have. The current situation have changed significantly from what we used to have. So as I said, we're looking at the country perspective, the Gambia. Currently what happened is like when the COVID came, one thing the Gambia did was to use multi-sectoral and partnership approaches to it, where a response team was created, and that there was negotiation and collaborations between the ministry and the Ministry of Health, Finance, the Teachers Union, UNICEF, UNESCO, right down to cabinet level, the national level assembly, and some key partners like the MRC Holland, which contributes a lot in terms of teacher development, infrastructural development. They built a lot of schools for the Gambia, and also they train teachers. We commissioned the distance learning program also through radio and television. They were not actually meant to actually deliver lessons as the curriculum, but they were meant to, one, keep the children safe at home, and also during the process, they could be helped with the parents to learn. In that, teachers were the ones who delivered the lessons themselves, and you have some volunteers as technical support in terms of recording the lessons. The engagement of school administrators, like the conferences. We have this grassroots organizations of teachers, like the conferences of heads of schools, of senior secondary schools, the basic cycles, the lower basic and the upper basic schools. They were also engaged in the discussions and the like. And the provision of PPEs, the personal protective equipment, washing equipment, even masks and the like were also provided by the government to schools that were engaged. The radio and television sensitization were also prominent, where issues around the pandemic were discussed and efforts of the ministry to make sure that people are awakened, they know the situation, and at the same time help to keep the children safe, which were nationwide. We have some online TVs that were also involved in the process. We have a series of online TVs. About 7 TV stations were involved and 21 radio stations. The development of safe school protocols, and there was this cost-cutting where teachers were involved. The cluster monitors who monitors operations in schools, itinerant teachers, and some education officers were involved to come together to have this unified protocol that looks at children as to what are the protocols when people are entering the school, protocols within the school, and protocols in the classroom. That helps to also define what all schools should, primarily what schools should do to make sure that the schools are safe. Successful conduct of terminal examinations, particularly when we have these terminal classes where they sit to common exams. And without them, there wouldn't be anything like transition from one level to the other. Those exams were conducted in two phases. You have the first one, which is the grade 9, year 9 exams, and that allowed transition to senior secondary schools. So they had theirs in June, July, and then they start to the exams. And then we have the WAS, West African Senior Secondary School Certificate Examination also, which also took place in July, August, September, around that end. And then you have, those are this exam classes enables transition and promotion to other levels. And the government makes sure that these exams were there. But thanks to God that there was no serious incident. We didn't have any report of cases of COVID during those exams because they were also observing these protocols. Support to private schools, in some instances, government do not have a package for them. But at the regional level, which is the regions that we have, some schools do not have the capacity to even get their children to sit to the exams because financially they were sort of bankrupt. So the regions intervene and make sure that these kids are either transferred to some public schools where they have their remedial classes and examinations, sit to their exams so that they could go along with all of the students in public schools and the like. Because the private schools, definitely, most of them, majority of them had that problem. There were efforts, continue. There were efforts towards the reopening of school also. And just yesterday, the declaration was that schools are going to be open in two phases. The grade 9s to 12, 7, 8, 9, 10 to 12 will open first, which is the 14th, next Wednesday. And the 28th, you have the ECD and the lower basics, which is grade 1 to 6 also would be open. But there were efforts, tremendous efforts to transfer ownership of leadership to schools and communities. One was that the engagement of national and international partners in education for technical, physical, and material support was because we've seen their contribution in the previous exercise and that they are engaged now. The engagement and preparation of grassroots operatives were empowering of the regional offices in sensitization and preparation for the implementation of safe schools. About 134 cluster monitors and itinerant teachers were prepared as trainers because they interact with the schools on daily basis. You have 24 regional officers who were also prepared for the coordination across the country. And we have 210 regional technical assistant committees, we call the TAC. Every region has this. So we have 35 from each region of the 6 regions. They were also prepared. They involved the health, Red Cross, community development, environment at regional level. We are also called and engaged in
Zabi?
Yes.
Yes, you have 1 minute to conclude. Thank you.
Okay, this is from this slide. And then we have about 4,172 teachers, students, all prepared so that they can take leadership in making sure that the schools are safe. And the curriculum delivery modalities were also, and there were simulations as to how do we operate and help schools to have the capacity to implement the safe school. Yes. And next slide. First, we have teachers support in the provision of online lessons also to children were happening, and then preparation of teachers to manage the implementation of safe schools. Because now you cannot have the school managers only. It has to involve the teachers to make sure that the schools are safe and effective learning also taken, particularly schools that will be engaged in the mixed methods of physical and virtual teaching. And then the supply teacher supply would be one of them. Student also, teachers to supply teachers and teachers, students with SD card, I think something, because we want to go into offline learning also. Next. And the challenges mainly are the magnitude of students. It's because particularly in the urban areas where you have these big classes, they are going to be reduced by the new dimension. So you have the student numbers and the new normal within the perspective of people also, particularly in the provinces towards the pandemic, because they've not experienced major cases here and there. So for them, it seems it does not happen. The demand for classrooms and teachers, because we are going to reduce our teachers' classes to a minimum of 30, which used to be in some classes in the urban areas, you're up to 70, 60. So the number of classes for classrooms are going to be major problems. Provision of sustainability of the PPEs, like supplying the PPEs, because you may need regular supply because these are children, and that may be a big problem. Mass engagement of curriculum recovery, and the strain that it will put on teachers and students, because we've lost about half of the last year, half of the teaching period of the last year. The need for intensive monitoring also by teachers at the school and school administration, the community-based, because we have this community engagement in schools, the cluster monitors, and they are going to be stretched. And the physiosocial effect on the players would be major challenges that we will be facing during the reopening of school. So we are thinking around all this as to how do we make sure that the schools are safe and also there is effective and efficient learning, and we are able to also recover the lost curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamin, for sharing a very organized approach from the Gambia with the safe school protocols and so on, and also sharing the challenges. Now, I'm wondering if Mr. Mosimanegape Gosa is available.
Yeah, it's not his people. It's my boss.
Hello? Hello, Mr. Mosimanegape, are you available? It looks like he's still not being connected. I'm going to ask them, Mr. James Ngoga from Rwanda. Are you ready to make your presentation?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, thank you very much. Please go ahead. And Henok, please put the slides for Rwanda, Mr. James Ngoga. Thank you. Mr. James, you have 7 minutes.
Yeah,
Over to you.
Thank you, moderator. I'm going to give an overview of the Rwandan teachers' experience during the school closure. Definitely, we all know that the COVID pandemic has affected everyone's life in one way or another, especially those ones involved in schooling, students, parents, as well as teachers, educators. So in Rwanda, like in many countries, schools have been closed since March 2020. But at the onset, definitely the first priority was to ensure safety of students that's why schools were closed. Then the second priority was to find a way to ensure continuity of teaching and learning during that period of school closure. In the case of Rwanda, during this unprecedented period, teachers have shown some resilience and played extraordinary roles, thus emerging as true leaders during the crisis. For example, writing lesson scripts for radio lessons, then teaching radio and television lessons, sensitizing parents and communities for the fight against COVID-19, and supporting school leaders on various aspects of school leadership. A brief on some of the interventions that have been done to ensure a continuity of learning. Like James said, there has been training of school leaders in school improvement planning. This one didn't stop, it was conducted. This is meant to enhance their capacity in improving learning outcomes in their schools. and as well as preparing them for school reopening. There has also been developing guides for teachers, school leaders, and parents on ensuring children's well-being and continued learning. There has been reported cases of child abuses during this period of lockdown, but there has been guides that were extended to teachers by teachers to the parents so that they can live harmoniously and guide the children who are at home. Then there has also been a process of uploading books and other reference materials on e-learning platform to increase accessibility for the learners. Then, as I said, radio and TV lesson programs and the related weekly timetable. And then sensitization, of course, of parents who are the major stakeholders in taking a role in supporting children continued learning. Then there has also been continued virtual training of teachers in ICT to enhance integration of ICT in teaching and learning. Then continuous professional development courses for teachers and school leaders, and increasing the use of social media in sharing lessons, exercises, and giving feedback. Then there has also been distribution of radio boxes and smartphones to low-income households to help them to have connectivity. And then there was also celebration of the International Literacy Day and the launch of the Literacy Month last October. This was meant to awaken the parents, the learners, that life learning still continues. Then there are some plans on going forward, and some are in the process. We have been developing a school reopening plan. Of course, schools are expected to open soon, starting with the higher learning institution, then following the higher secondary, and so on. It will be done in phases. Then teachers are being trained in COVID-19 preventive measures, and then, of course, how are they going to handle the students during this period? Then there is also a plan to inform learners to report in advance of school reopening so as to prepare teaching documents, lesson plans, and schemes of work, and so on. And then set and implement a strategy to ensure that all learners come back to school. There is a worry that there may be high dropout, so students have really to be sensitized, as well as the local leaders and parents, to ensure that all students report back to school. Then there are some strategies, enabling factors that have been done to foster leadership and mindset. Of course, we have set a criteria for teacher promotion from a junior teacher to master teacher, definitely with collaborative experience. Then there has been teaching experience has to be considered. The teacher statute has been gazetted. Then, as I said, there has been this vision of continuous structural professional development courses. Then during this period, also developed teachers' code of conduct. Then we have also developed policy of teacher development and management. And also, we have also developed instructions on selection of school leaders so that we can have school leaders who are effective and efficient in school leadership and management. Then we have also developed a teacher's motivation package, and best performing teachers are rewarded. Then we are also developing a career guidance policy to make lifelong learning a reality for all. Though there are some challenges, like high turnover of teachers, especially during this period, we don't know how many are going to turn up, but we are also trying strategies for recruiting teachers, and well knowing that there is a high teacher-pupil ratio. How are we going to handle it during this period? That's why we propose that learners will be coming in shifts and so on. Then there is also inadequate school infrastructure, a limited internet connection, limited number of classrooms. All of those are challenges, especially in this period where we have to ensure that the learners also have to keep social distance. So with the limited infrastructure, how will it be done? So those are the challenges that we are looking at. Then in reality, as the previous speakers said, this pandemic got us unaware and showed that there are really weaknesses within the setup. This pandemic has exposed the underlying difficulties of distance learning, accessing and teaching devices. And there is a need for strategic measures to prepare for such an unprecedented situations. Really, those are the situation, and that is the brief of what I had to present about Rwanda. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. James Ngoga, Head of the Teacher Development and Management and the Career Guidance and Counseling Department of Rwanda Education Board from Kigali. Thank you very much for sharing a very organized response to COVID, and teachers package and other things are provided. That's really excellent efforts. Now, I think we understand that Mr. Musima Negape from Botswana couldn't connect. So I'm going to ask Peter to share with us Teacher Task Force. Peter, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Presentation is loading. Great, thank you. Again, thank you so much for all the previous talks and presentations. I thought they're all very, very rich in detail, and glad that everyone could be part of this session today. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update about what the Teacher Task Force is doing in terms of leadership and other elements related to World Teachers Day. As you know, the Teacher Task Force is a network of over 140 organizations and countries who support teachers, teaching, and it's hosted by UNESCO. Since the beginning of the COVID crisis, the Teacher Task Force has been advocating for teachers so they are protected, supported, recognized during the pandemic. This was covered in the Teacher Task Force call for action. Support was not only in relation to school closures, but also in terms of implementing distance education measures, and also in relation to the school and opening process. The Teacher Task Force recently released guidance for policymakers, and they aim to provide clear guidance, public and private providers, on measures that need to be taken for teachers and teaching for the reopening of schools in the terms of the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide, please. The main areas of the policy recommendations tackle 7 dimensions in particular. They include social dialogue and communications, safety and physical health, teacher psychological and socio-emotional, teacher preparation and learning, teacher deployment, teacher rights and working conditions, and finally, monitoring evaluation. And this is available on the Teacher Task Force website. Next slide, please. So following the joint framework for reopening schools and the policy guidance that was released earlier, UNESCO, the Teacher Task Force, and the ILO released a toolkit for school leaders to support and protect teachers and education staff in the return to school. This toolkit builds on the 7 dimensions identified in the policy recommendations, and it breaks each of these elements down into a series of actionable guiding questions, tips for school leaders, and emerging best practices collected by school leaders around the world. Also, it includes other resources and lists of tools. The toolkit recognizes the importance of local context. In many countries, the pandemic situation is evolving, and local decision-making about when to reopen schools will be determined by a broad range of considerations. So what is right for one school may not be right for another. In all contexts, school leaders need to set priorities and recognize that trade-offs may be needed. For example, to reduce the number of teachers and students on site to facilitate physical distancing, schools may need to selectively reopen and perhaps stagger by grade and or level. What the toolkit does show us is that school leaders will need to think about key issues in relation to teachers and education support staff as they adapt national directives to plan to reopen their schools. The first edition came out earlier in June, and we have put out a second edition that's enriched with more content in early September, which is also on the Teacher Task Force website. Next slide, please. There's a few knowledge products that have been produced. The World Teachers Day fact sheet includes key statistics on teachers, training, leadership, and on school resources. There has been a key knowledge product on gender and teaching, which looks at the dimension of gender and inclusion. And finally, a policy brief on teachers and inclusive education. Next slide, please. Finally, the new knowledge platform has been launched, and also the Knowledge Hub. So these are tools for policymakers, in particular in terms of all areas of content related to teachers and teaching. So it is a repository, and the idea is it's a one-stop shopping destination for information related to the teaching profession and teachers. So the official launch was on Monday to mark and celebrate World Teachers Day. So we are happy to, very happy to say that it is officially launched at this point. So this is a platform that we will be populating increasingly over the days and months with lots of rich information that will be very useful to policymakers. So the URL for to be accessed. So, and thank you very much, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter Wallet, for sharing with us the excellent work that Teacher Task Force is doing. I'm really excited to see these excellent resources and the knowledge platform. I think they will be very, very useful for all the African countries as well as beyond. Okay, so thank you very much for your patience, participants. This is a time for questions and answers. I have seen some questions being posted in the chat box, and I'm going to ask Peter again to moderate these questions. Peter, I think we have about 20 minutes. I'm asking your indulgence to go 5 minutes beyond.
Yeah.
Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Yumiko. Some questions were country specific, where some questions could also be posed of all stakeholders here. I think one question that there was a question for Rwanda about the partnership aspect of the development of learning materials in terms of the LSM, TV, and radio, and what kind of partnerships were developed and how that, what was the dynamic in terms of furthering that kind of work. There was also comments about how teachers have clearly shown themselves to be frontline workers in the COVID-19 pandemic, and what are the opportunities in terms of this situation and emphasizing teacher leadership in policymaking and skills development. And there was also a question for Gambia in terms of with the reduction of class sizes, what are some of the strategies being used to compensate with the current size of the teacher workforce? So I think I'll stop there and we can ask more, but I'll over to you, Yumiko.
Okay, thank you very much. So these are the questions, and I'm wondering, there was a specific question to the Gambia, but some people, okay. So maybe Mr. Lamin, would you like to respond to this specific question to you?
Okay, one of the issues, like as I said, we used to have these very big class sizes in the urban areas, which is sometimes up to 70. And that by the health regulations that school class sizes should go down to 25. But we've also seen that we can accommodate up to 30. So that would, in relation, that would give us about 2 classes to 1 now, in some cases or more. And eventually you would have to come up with strategies like that where you cannot have single shifting, you'd be having double shifting, where part of the students will be coming in the morning for about 4 or 5 hours, and the others will be coming in the afternoon. You also have what we call, in most serious cases, we have the strategy of double shifting and alternating at the same time, where you have your school to be divided into 4 main groups, one coming in the morning for about part of the week, which is about 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You have another coming in the afternoon for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then you have another group coming from Thursday to Saturday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday in the morning, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday in the afternoon. The only difficulty with that is it's going to compromise contact time. So what we are advocating for is to have the blended method of physical and virtual learning, particularly when we have the syllabi on SD cards, these cards that you put on your mobile phones as your memories. You can have when the syllabi is put on that, children can interact with that also, and that there are topics. We are also recommending that topics that are not very difficult and are easy to read and understand can be given as homework, take-home lessons and assignments. The most difficult one would be taught in class. So it's sort of, teachers would have leadership role in doing all that, in managing all those situations. So as we said, it's going to be strenuous on most of them because socially they are going to have only Sunday, most of them, as the time that they can and others. Most of them would be working from Monday to Saturday and will be working longer hours. Psychologically, it's going to have effect on them. Physically, it's going to have effect on them. Though there is going to be some compensation, but it cannot compensate for the health, loss, and all other things that are going to. So it's a very tricky situation, but most of the schools do not have the same situation. That's where the school leadership and teacher leadership would play, because teachers would have to take the initiative of making sure that with their school administrators that these things works in that school. But what we did is to do simulations and also discuss with teachers and heads of schools we discuss around those things, and then we can virtually see what the situation, and then we discuss. But practically, we would start from the 14th when we may see some dynamics around it too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamin. There is another specific question for Mr. James of Rwanda, who sponsored financially the development of learning support materials for TV and radio. Mr. James, would you like to respond to this?
Yeah, thank you so much. What I can say is that the Rwandan government took a leading role, and also we had the development partners who intervened in supporting. We had a team of teachers specialized in different areas, in sciences, humanities, and languages, and they took a leading role in the development of the script lessons, TV and radio lessons. So it was like a multi-approach where we had the different stakeholders. Rwanda Education Board, of course, the implementing agency, and under the Ministry of Education, of course, with the support of the government and the development partners. They all played a role in ensuring that there is continuity in teaching and learning. And as I said at the beginning, the timetable is always given on a weekly basis to prepare students such that they are aware of when and at which time a specific lesson will pass on TV, will be aired. Definitely we have like sciences. It is appropriate to teach sciences using television where students can view. Then when it comes like to languages, we could use radios. They could listen like in sentence construction and so on. So in a nutshell, it was a combined effort by the government through the Ministry of Education and the Rwanda Education Board, and then specific development partners who gave that particular support.
Thank you very much for this answer. There is also another question to Denise on Education International. Did the survey include information data on types of, it's from Peter, consultation, metadata on the consultation themselves? Peter, this is for Education International, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Denise, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Yumiko. Yes, indeed, the survey included data, the survey itself, but also the in-depth interviews actually on consultation, dialogue, and so on, to what extent it had taken place, how successful it had been, what the barriers and challenges had been. And the results are quite interesting. We have already posted the executive summary of the report on the chart in English, French, and Portuguese. The full report will be released in the next few days. It's just being translated. Indeed, it did include all that. But in addition to that, just yesterday we had an important meeting, actually, a seminar of the teaching profession in Africa, which also looked at dialogue and consultation during COVID around the curriculum, etc. So there are good examples, but unfortunately, overall, it shows that it has not been happening adequately. If you may allow me, Chair, to also comment on the question on intrinsic motivation of teachers. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. I mean, teachers, we can encourage them to be intrinsically motivated. But in reality, we must take into account Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There is no way we can tell you to be motivated when you're hungry. You don't know where you'll get your next meal. You don't have any shelter above your head. You don't have any housing as a teacher. You don't have any money to pay your medical bills. You don't have health insurance. We're talking about very difficult circumstances in which many of our teachers in Africa find themselves, with low salaries, without adequate health insurance or no health insurance at all. So the first thing must be actually to provide decent salaries and working conditions, the necessary support, the necessary environment, tools and resources. That will really help, rather than merely calling for intrinsic motivation. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this input. Very important indeed. I see two hands up. Mr. Henry Kapalo. Okay, Madame Nodo Lisette. Would you like to, ladies first, and then Mr. Henry. Madame Lisette Nodo, would you like to pose your question, please? I don't think I can hear her. So, Mr. Henry, please go ahead with your question. Please unmute your microphone.
Okay. Am I on now?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Thank you. I just wanted to find out from the panelists. Around mid-May, there were calls to suspend the entire academic year. Now, with the benefit of hindsight in October, do you think such calls were justified, or such calls were just a mere fear of the unknown? Then the other question that I want to find out is, we know most schools in Africa, they do not have the benefit of technology and everything else. Now, with a sudden move to remote learning, how are we in a position to know how this has impacted on the quality of teaching and learning, despite all the efforts that we have put in so far? Or we will only be in a position to know how this would have impacted the quality of teaching and learning maybe later next year? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fundamental question. Madame Nodorisette, are you able to ask questions? Okay, it seems that she is not. Okay, I can take one or two questions and then I'll ask all the panelists to respond in 1 minute. Is there anybody who would like to ask a question? Okay, so let me ask a question. From this COVID-19, which dominated 2020, we have seen a number of good experience as well as a partners interventions. What is a prospect? How is it going to be influencing the teaching profession in Africa positively and some negatively and so on? So together with Mr. Henry's question, I am inviting a panelist in the order of their going. So Ms. Landy Diamond, would you like to respond in 1 minute?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The COVID-19 pandemic is definitely going to redefine and influence the different countries in different ways, depending on where they are and how they were affected. It is going to be challenging to move back, but we also need to look at what especially the NDP goals, what is it that is required moving forward and where the countries are, and try to equip our systems in order to cope, closing the gap that has been done by the damage, and empowering our educators, especially when it comes to blended learning, like as alluded in my presentation. Some schools can only do face-to-face curriculum in most African areas. At some point, we need to see how are we going to embrace digital education and making sure that we equip our learners with the fourth industrial skills and problem solving, critical skills, and everything else in order for us to catch up with the rest of the other developed countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is a very precious voice from a real school leader. Now, Shemu, can I invite you to make your 1 minute intervention?
Thank you, Yumiko. I believe that the experience of COVID-19, and then which continues to evolve, necessitates the need to relook at the whole education system, and especially the extent to which the education sector can really prepare itself against disasters such as this. That means that we have to look at interventions in terms of how adequately we can prepare the teachers to be able to be central to the continuity of education during such situations. Also, in a way, we cannot ignore technology, but we have seen that technology alone is not enough. So we may have to be looking at a hybrid situation in terms of teaching and in terms of learning going forward. Now, I think the question that was asked around whether the decision to suspend the calendar was wise, I think at the time, around May, the knowledge about COVID-19 was still evolving. And therefore, based on the information that countries had at the time, that is why they made those decisions that they made. But also with flexibility, we have seen that many of the countries have since reviewed some of those decisions, having learned more about COVID-19. So I think that would be my response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shem. You are always very logical and analytical. I'm so grateful. Now I'm asking Dr. Denis Signolo, Senior Coordinator. You have already spoken, but if you have any other last words in half a minute, please go ahead.
Yes, was it a wise decision to close schools? Yes, it was. The health, safety, and well-being of teachers, students, and education staff must always come first. Will it influence the teaching profession moving forward? Absolutely. The way we train teachers, the issue of class size, etc., is fundamental. We need to turn this strategy into an opportunity. Yesterday, the South African Minister of Education said they were able to get the kind of things they always wanted as the ministry, like improving school health, water, etc. That's what the ministries of education must be doing across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this excellent intervention. Now I am inviting James McIntyre of a MasterCard Foundation. You have 1 minute, please.
Thanks, Miko. Yeah, no, I think, similar to what other colleagues have said, I think for the foundation, we've seen this really big pivot to respond to the pandemic through online and distance learning. And this has involved a lot of, really innovative interventions, supporting software development, extending access to different kinds of online tools and devices. But what we're really seeing now is the need to ensure that we're providing enough support to teachers to make sure that they're not left out of this shift and that they're actually empowered to help drive and facilitate some of this, tech-enabled education and online learning in the future. And that's really going to require a significant investment in support to teachers to make sure that they are empowered to facilitate these different modes of learning in future crises. And it's a really big shift, but we need to remember that teachers are the real innovators, and they're the ones that sort of lead the way in making the most of the tools that they have at their disposal. And so just needing to bring them into this conversation about online learning is really important.
Thank you very much. Yes, bringing teachers to the conversation, very, very important. I see, thank you very much, James. Juliet, are you raising your hand? Is that a question? You may come in now, briefly.
Yes, thank you. It's actually a question. This is Juliet from Pawe, and listening to the presentations today that were really great in terms of how we have actively participated to caution teachers during the COVID-19 pandemic period, and as obvious, remained steadfast in building on their capacities. My question is on how can continuously the capacity of teachers on ICT. I know it took us COVID-19 for us to seriously see the real need to have like infrastructure and also skills by teachers to be able to conduct online learning. But just thinking broadly, I know we were only able to reach a significant proportion of teachers continentally in terms of engaging them to do online learning. But I'm just here thinking about the marginalized communities and teachers who probably even do not have mobile phones and and are unable to coordinate some of these online sessions and media planning sessions as well. So what are these sustainable plans that we can apply to make sure that we have all teachers well built in terms of digital skills and digital information that they can use to conduct business, whether or not there's a pandemic moving forward?
Thank you, Juliet, for this excellent question. I'm asking two country colleagues, Mr. Lamin Fotojo and Mr. James Ngoga, to respond to this question in addition to other questions. So, Mr. Lamin, you have 1 minute. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. For the courses on technology and remote learning, I think they are usually, I saw them as contingency approaches to the situation. They're not really the remedies for actual delivery of lessons, particularly countrywide lessons. When you look at the coverages, you look at the access to technology, the cost of itself to prepare digital lessons and the expertise that are needed are too much expensive compared to physical teaching. So I think partially it may have some effect, but I don't think it can, respond to the need for paradigm shift to that type of teaching and learning. It is more feasible in the urban areas. You have geographical problems with regards to it. With the partnership, is good in terms of helping to get ideas in making decisions that will help your intervention. But also, some partners would use the platform to sell their programs, which may not be national interest and may have some conflict of interest in the process. So those are the negative parts that you may find in them. You can have some very good international approaches, but some partners will also want to sell their programs alongside your program, which may not be effective, because I've seen instances where they have intervention areas that are not national. And when you want to have a national approach and somebody wants to come up with an intervention area, like for some geographical areas, that may cost you a lot more money or resources to sort of spread it out to reach your country as a nation. Those are things that you have some of the negativities, the conflict of interests that you have. For the continuing of teacher training and ICT, for my country, when you look at the population, though you have about over 60% of teachers that are between the age of 21 and 35, which are very young, that are, or you have a significant number, particularly in management, that we used to call born before computers. They have this phobia. Some of them have phobia for ICT. So those are some of the hurdles that you'll have. It's sustainability. I'm seeing a feature in it. Probably when these people that are who fail with technology, that the very young teachers are engaged. So that's one of the things that we're doing to make sure that they're empowered to participate more in the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamin. Mr. James Ngoga, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, thank you so much. The application of ICT depends on like 4 factors, I can say. Definitely, there has to be power. We have to be having computers and accessories. Then there is a need for also connectivity. And of course, the skill is on application of ICT. What we have done in Rwanda, we have what we call smart classrooms, where we get like 2 rooms in a school, and then we equip them with the computers and the internet connectivity. But of course, we look at those schools where there is electricity coverage, where there is power. Then we have some development partners who are focusing on ICT, not any other area, including training of teachers. So that's what we have been doing. Even during this period of COVID, those teachers were continuously being trained in different modules related to ICT. But of course, I can't say that not all schools have electricity, and that becomes a hindrance. It becomes a hindrance some teachers lack these ICT skills. Then, of course, the internet connectivity, which is accompanied by irregularity. Definitely, it's a long way to go. But if any country is to succeed, and especially we have learned a lot during this period of the pandemic, we have to prepare for the unprecedented circumstances to ensure that we are prepared for distance learning in case of any eventuality, so that we have to put every infrastructure in place to prepare for other eventualities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. So this is the end of our rich discussion. I am not even trying to attempt to summarize this rich discussion. I'm sure all of us have received something. We learned from all the panelists that in this regional meeting in English, empowerment and leadership is very important. And also support to teachers is vital. And listening to teachers, in fact, the support plan or policy without listening to teachers' voices is not going to be helpful. COVID-19 crisis made it very clear what the real needs are and what the challenges and what the possibilities and opportunities are. We must change this crisis into an opportunity to deal with the most important things. ICBA has been working to support teachers and listening to teachers' voices. We are running every Wednesday afternoon in Addis Ababa time. In West Africa, it's a morning time. The 90-minute webinar. So please do visit our site, and then please join our webinars. We are running it in English one week and French in next week. And finally, there was a issue of ICT integration in teacher development. Together with IIT and Inroad in Beijing Normal University, ICBA has ODLTA, Open Distance Learning for Teachers in Africa. This is a online course for online self-taught course. It takes 2 to 3 hours in English, and you can, when you complete the course, you will understand how to run open distance learning courses, and you get a digital certificate. So please join us, and please take advantage of all the resources. So I would like to thank all the panelists and participants for making this session very interactive and resourceful. Thank you very much. Please join me in putting your hands to thank everyone. And Peter, thank you very much. I didn't give you the time to respond, but I hope you will forgive me. We are already 10 minutes late. So thank you very much, everyone. Please stay safe.
Same to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, Viva teachers. And happy World Teachers Day week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Keep well.
Goodbye. Thank you. Keep well. Keep well and keep teaching.
Yes, keep well, keep teaching. Very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please do visit the